Happy to come back here with Aidan Davis of the First and 10 podcast and some other things. He told me he would do his plugs this week, so we'll make sure he gets his plugs in. But what'd you think of that game after having a week to kind of dissect it here, Aidan? Because it was an interesting game. You did call out some of the things that ended up happening to a degree, but I don't think it went quite according to plan, especially the high-scoring nature, but still featuring some big defense at times too.
Yeah, it was a game that I was hesitantly, at least hoping wasn't going to happen, but it did happen. I mean, everything that could have gone wrong for the Cowboys did in terms of the way that Dan Campbell was able to scheme against them. I mean, attacking the secondary, hitting the outsides, the weaknesses on the Cowboys defense that the Chiefs and the Eagles weren't necessarily able to take advantage of in the 2 weeks prior to the Lions game. Dan Campbell did an excellent job. Obviously, y'all's defense gave Dak fits in the first half to the point that, putting us in a hole early. It was just one of those things where the defense wasn't able to give us room to climb out of that hole that y'all's defense put us in early. So, not entirely surprised. Didn't expect to win 3 in a row against playoff caliber teams, but it's one of those things I was hoping for that didn't go our way. But yeah, I was proud that I did predict the James Houston sack. I will at least take credit for that.
Revenge game, you had it right. He did have his moment. I was kind of happy about that. I always liked Houston when he was here. He just wasn't a great fit. But Shayne's back in studio with us this week, and we were talking about kind of culture and winning cultures versus successful cultures. And I'm wondering if this game kind of reminds you of that a little bit, Shayne, because our producer Mike was making a good point in the break, talking about St. Brown kind of powering through and having a good week last week. And obviously a guy like George Pickens has played very well for the Cowboys this year, but in the back of my head, I don't think I've said it on air yet, but in the back of my head, I just always have thought that that's going to end badly. I don't mean like I'm not trying to disparage the guy, but to me that's his tenure with the Steelers didn't go great, and he's been better with the Cowboys, but I was surprised because it seemed like the Lions kind of shut him down, and once he got a little disinterested, it seemed to show, and that although Schottenheimer has done a good job with the culture there, that I did see the difference between those two receivers, it seems like, because obviously the Cowboys are we talked about this with Aidan last week, the Cowboys are a very polarizing franchise as a whole. You got Jerry Jones in charge. He does things a little differently. He's a personality unto himself. And so they've gone from America's team to still one of the teams that everybody likes to watch, but maybe more so they like to see them on the losing side a little bit more. Aidan was talking about. So I'm curious how you kind of diagnose their culture and with Jerry Jones still at the helm for seemingly ever here.
So it's so hard to truly know if you're not in the building and you don't see and hear and kind of get that, but it makes it so hard to believe that there's not some sort of mold festering somewhere. Just the little bit of negativity that just starts as one little patch, and slowly over time it spreads. Maybe it's there, maybe it's not, but I feel like there's always some sort of a distraction that kind of pulls people away, and there's a lot of noise. And I remember one thing that Belichick was really big on in New England. He had a big sign above the door as you leave the building that said, "Ignore the noise, the good noise and the bad noise, because neither one of it means shit." Excuse my language, but sorry. But it was neither one of those mean anything, because the good noise doesn't affect you, the bad noise doesn't affect you, and sometimes when you get that noise, it can come for good reasons and bad reasons, and if the reasons are distraction and non-football related, or non-parallel to your game plan or your strategy or your technique or the task at hand, I think that sometimes creates distractions that that can sometimes fester into negativity that kind of spreads in a very contagious, like a contagion across that locker room.
That's a great description of it, because it seems like, even because obviously the Cowboys have had a history of success. They had the era with Aikman and Emmitt Smith and Deion Sanders and Michael Irvin, where they were very successful. But that was a lot of personalities to manage even back in the day, with Neon Deion and Michael Irvin, and a lot of the folks there were vastly different personalities. And although it was very successful as a culture, I don't know where that would kind of break down as far as a winning culture versus successful culture, because they were winning and they were successful, but it's hard to sustain that too.
It over a long period of time, yes, but also, things were different back then, and when you would allow certain things to happen, it kind of hid the negativity. But what happens in today's world is negativity is exposed very quickly and easily, and like wildfire. The public knows more than anyone has ever known in the history of time right now. The public knows things so fast because of your Adam Schefters and your insiders and the leaks within the building. Back then, any negativity that happened, it could get squashed. No one would hear about it. And also, I think the coaching staff and the organization probably gave those guys a sense of camaraderie and confidence that they could be a certain way, and there was no pushback from the authority, so that they kind of could get away with things. And you never want to call it the inmates running the asylum, but I think sometimes in some of those situations it plays out in a good way, because everybody's confident, everybody feels good, everyone has warm fuzzy feelings, everybody's a celebrity. It's hard to explain, but then when any of that negativity gets exposed, it crumbles really fast, and that's why I don't think something like that can sustain over a long time.
Well, that makes me think of the Micah Parsons deal this year, Aidan, because Jerry Jones has obviously been used to kind of controlling the media cycle to a degree. He's the one on top. He knows how to deal with the media. He's going to push his narrative. But Parsons has his own popular podcast now. He's able to have a bigger voice, so that played out, I think, in front of the world a little more than maybe past negotiations that Jones has had to have, to Shayne's point.
Yeah, I think that I really like Shayne's point about the coaching, where and Shayne was, I think, hit the nail on the head. When you're dealing with a coach like Schottenheimer or McCarthy or Jason Garrett, those coaches who are more players coaches, then the vibe of the team is really dictated by external factors and how things are going on the field. Like, what's the vibe in the locker room like? How's the team performing? You don't really have that central direction where you had with like a guy like Jimmy Johnson, who players knew that, good or bad, that it was his team. Players were following him. He was in control. But with a guy like Schottenheimer and a guy like Mike McCarthy, and I am a big Schottenheimer guy. Throughout this season, I've been really impressed with Schottenheimer, but he is very much a player's coach, where, yeah, Parsons gets traded. He's not the one to set the direction at that point. Then you get all these external factors coming in. You get you lose to the Cardinals right before the bye week, and things just look bad. And so it's tough if you're a player's coach to turn that around, whereas if you're a guy like Belichick or you're a guy like Jimmy Johnson, where everybody stands behind you, then at that point you're controlling the narrative. You're not letting the media control the team's narrative. So yeah, I think it's a lot of, the Cowboys, they're going to draw eyeballs. There's going to be buzz in the media no matter what. I think it's up to the coach to either in that and to get all the players behind him, or if you're more of a guy like Schottenheimer, to kind of let the players know that the players are playing for Schottenheimer, but he's not really the one setting the direction. Even though I love him, he's not that force that's just going to say, all right, tune everything out. This is our team. Like, we're ready to go. That doesn't really seem to be Schottenheimer's vibe. Granted, early, we don't really know, but from what we've seen so far, he's a lot more of the player's coach who's just going to sway with how things are going externally.
That's a good point. I mean, and I remember, because we even talked about it last year, because Ben Johnson was basically the hottest coaching candidate, or one of them. And after the Lions beat the Cowboys last year, it was pretty apparent that they were looking for possibly a change there. And we were talking about Ben Johnson, and I always thought he wasn't a good culture fit at all for the Jerry Jones led Cowboys. That was the part that I think would have him hesitant, even if he liked what he saw in Dak Prescott and some of the offensive pieces. I just don't think he would have fit well there. He waited till he could get a regime that he was more comfortable with, because I think he passed on that Washington job. That I don't think he had interest in that Dallas job, all so he could work with an ownership group that would be more similar to what the Lions are doing with Holmes and Campbell. And that is part of working with Jerry Jones. You have to understand, hey, I'm trying to be a player's coach. I'm trying to appeal on that side and fall in line with the de facto leader that is Jerry Jones.
Yeah, that was always Cowboys fans' pipe dream of, oh, what about Ben Johnson? We all in the back of our heads knew that it was never going to happen, but obviously, given the success they had in Detroit and coming from that Dan Campbell lineage, I mean, all of us fans were enamored by Ben Johnson, wanted him. But yeah, you're right. It's Jerry's looking for a guy who's going to bend the knee, who's going to do things his way. And also, from what we've seen from the last three coaching hires, Jerry seems to be more of the old school, like defensive, run the ball, grit and grind coach, as opposed to a Ben Johnson who he's fun to watch. He's going to get creative. He's offensive first. Yeah, I think every Cowboys fan knew that it wasn't a good fit in the slightest, but no denying that he, at least last coaching cycle, is the best coach on the market. So unfortunate that we couldn't get him, but yeah, he's not, you're right. He's not a guy who's going to bend the knee to Jerry. So it was never going to work in that regard.
I think they ended up with a good fit. I'm with you and with Schottenheimer, but we've got to get you out of here pretty soon. But I'm curious where you think they're headed, and what because I know this was a big game for the percentages. Obviously, the Lions ended up winning, and their percentages got boosted. But the future still looks bright for the Cowboys. So how do you see the rest of the season playing out here?
Yeah, there's two ways this plays out, and currently, as we sit right now, 6-6-1, I'm pretty okay with either. It's either we got some help on Monday night by way of the Eagles losing to the Chargers. Obviously, Jalen Hurts looked very bad in that game, to put it lightly, and so we got some help there. Maybe the Eagles drop two more, and we're able to backslide into a division win, which is unlikely, but at this point, it's the Cowboys' most likely road to the playoffs, is somehow stealing that division from the Eagles. We need them to drop one game to the Bills and then one game to one of the Raiders, and then they have two games against the Commanders. So losing a game against the Commanders or the Raiders at this point seems unlikely, even if the Eagles aren't looking great. So more than likely, the Cowboys are going to miss the playoffs, and in that case, we now hold 2 first-round picks, one from a Parsons trade, one from whatever pick we'll end up getting. So you miss the playoffs, you assume you're around like that 16 spot. If the Cowboys can build, maybe get an edge rusher with one pick, cornerback with another pick, start to build up that defense again. Obviously, you're firing Eberflus this offseason, the defensive coordinator. That 1 year experiment hasn't worked out. So I don't know. You come back next year with a revamped defense, hopefully a new defensive coordinator. Your offense, if you're able to retain Pickens, your offense stays pretty consistent. There's hope for the future. I think after that loss, Cowboys, the odds of a playoff berth are slim to none, barring an Eagles collapse at this point.
which you never know. There's still a lot of season left, but hopefully for the Cowboys' sake, they can make a bit of a run. But we appreciate you joining the show. Great analysis on both sides of the game, and hopefully we can have you back on when we run across the Cowboys here later on, or next year, or whenever. But look forward to following you in between. Be sure to tell us where the listeners can follow you here.
Yep, on Twitter. Aidan, AIDAN _Davis _12. You can hear me on Chop Sports on occasion. It's a regional sports network out of New Jersey. And you can read my work on Blogging the Boys. So those are the three main places you can find me and interact with me. But always appreciate your show and love joining.
Be sure to follow him. It's great stuff, as you can tell from the interview. And we'll look forward to talking to you again here and crossing paths with you later.
Awesome. You have a great night, Ryan.
All right. Thanks, Aidan. Appreciate it.